Welcome back to the Weekend Journal here on News Talk 580 WTCM. Yeah, you can hear it online at WTCMradio.com. Also, we take the show and we post it on Facebook and YouTube, so you can follow along in case you miss the Saturday morning broadcast. But we're glad to have you here. I'm Jack O'Malley. And as you know, or maybe you're new to the show here, I try to focus on all good things Michigan, Michigan news and topics. And I always like to have a newsmaker in to kind of discuss what's going on in a particular area, because I'm trying to make sure everybody understands the ins and outs of how Michigan operates, what happens, the good, the bad, the ugly, all that good stuff. And so I thought that it would be a good thing to talk about small business, because, you know, we hear about the big three, we hear about all these mega deals and tax incentives and all of this stuff, but what about the little guy or the littler guy, right? The small business. And the gentleman who kind of spearheads all that, herds the cats, if you will, is Brian Calley, who is the CEO of the Small Business Association of Michigan, and he joins us now. Sir, good morning. How are you?
Doing great, Jack. Thanks for having me on your show.
You bet. So, am I wrong there? You know, we hear about all of the, the big stuff, the battery plant here, the data plant there, the big three, Ford, Stellantis, GM. But small business truly is the backbone of the great state of Michigan, isn't it?
Yeah, small business isn't just a nice to have. It's absolutely essential. It is the backbone of the economy, the jobs infrastructure for most communities around the state. And it's actually, people don't think of it this way, but it's essential for big business to survive and thrive as well. We think about our, in Michigan, we're fortunate to have several corporate headquarters here in Michigan, bigger companies like, Dow or Meyer, Ford, Stryker, Gerber. These types of companies that are huge multinational corporate names, and people all over the world recognize these names. To us here in Michigan, those are family names.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
And even those giants started as small businesses, and oftentimes the larger businesses rely on smaller businesses to operate, whether it's a supply chain, their goods and services, acquisition of new technologies and ideas. So I would say that whether the business is big or small, to survive, it really needs small business.
Amen. So just for kind of, clarity's sake, is there a definition of small business? Is it, 1 to 50 employees, 1 to 100? What is it?
Well, there's different stages, and I think that's a very insightful question, Jack, because you have everything from single person businesses, which is like solopreneurs, sole proprietors, mm-hmm. independent contractors, the gig economy, all of that. And there are so many of those in Michigan, about 800,000 people that are in single person businesses. Wow. That's one of the bright spots in our economy. And then you have what we call stage one businesses, 1 to 9 employees. And then, and that's a really exciting part of our economy as well. Actually, the plurality of private sector employment comes from second stage businesses. And second stage small businesses are 10 to 99 employees. And then you have those medium-sized businesses where you're starting to tend toward the large, 100 to 499. And then large businesses we generally consider 500 or more employees. So those solopreneurs all the way up to large employers at 500 or more, it defines an easy definition. So we think of it in terms of stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, and then large, and we do it by employee count, generally speaking.
Sure. And, when we hear about all the economic development stuff, and, can you get this data center here? Oh, they're going to have 1,300 jobs, whatever the case may be. When a community could get a new business that might have 50 new head of household type jobs, that even though that's a small business, that can be a huge win for a small or medium-sized community where the metro areas, they don't even blink at something like that. So that's an area too where our small businesses, if a community can get somebody like that, it's a huge benefit.
Yeah, and it really it points toward a whole different economic strategy, which is your best bet is to make sure that the economy and the regulatory environment, the tax system, the workforce development system, the education system, that it all works for those that are already here.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we think in terms of economic development and how do we attract somebody from someplace else to come in here and save us. And that's not the best bet. The best bet is make sure that it works and works well for those that are already here. When they're growing, the best 50-employee business is the one that started smaller and grew to 50. You know, that's where you really see the power of employment in small business. Are small businesses just adding, and they're adding in 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 employees at a time. And so you're right, it never makes the headlines, but cumulatively, it's the most important thing we have going.
Yeah, well, one of the names just popped into my head as you were chatting that you had mentioned already. Meijer started out as a grocery store. Now look at it, right? It's a chain and it's massive. So
it really is.
Yeah.
And the cool thing about what we see a company like Meijer doing is prioritizing having locally made items on their shelves. Mm-hmm. And so it's a very large retailer and very successful, but they've created opportunity for small businesses, and it's a great win-win situation because smaller providers, and actually one in your own backyard, there's a Cultured Kombucha is a really exciting small business, one of the 50 companies to watch this year, and that product is on Meijer shelves today. But when it got its start, the start was in farmers markets.
Okay.
It's a really, really cool success story, and that, to me, that's what it's all about. That's when you see bigger businesses that are that create a symbiotic relationship with small businesses, I think that's where you're hitting the sweet spot.
Gotcha. Hey, folks, we're chatting with Brian Calley, who is the CEO of the Small Business Association of Michigan here on the Weekend Journal. And Brian, what really kind of got me, I got to get Brian on, is I was reading a story about the 2025 scorecard, which I didn't know existed until I read that article. And as I read it, I got the impression that there's good news there about small business, but there's also some warning signs that we need to be aware of. So could you explain to us the scorecard?
The scorecard report, SMAM and some partners through our foundation have tried to set the standard for measuring how is the economy going for entrepreneurs. We hear a lot about the top-line economic statistics, GDP and unemployment rate, and just the things, how income is going up or down as a whole in a state or across the nation. But there's a whole bunch of subset stories below that, and one of which is how is the economy working for entrepreneurs. That needed some definition. So 21 years ago, we started the Entrepreneurship Scorecard Report to define how is the economy going for entrepreneurs and small businesses. And I would say as much as ever right now, it is a very complex and mixed story. There are lots of things to be excited about, but there's also a lot of things to be very concerned about. And if you were to talk to small businesses in different regions and different industries around the state, you will find that some are really tearing it up right now. They're having record or banner years, and there's others that are really struggling to survive. What we try to do is to get to the bottom of what's happening. Where are people finding success? Where are the areas that people are struggling overall? What are the trends? And then our hope is that policymakers will pay close attention to this and look for solutions, particularly for the areas where things aren't going well, but also to figure out how do we take the things that are going well to the next level.
Sure. So one of the things that I hear, about the economy in Michigan and jobs in Michigan and bringing this company, the mega widget company to come to Michigan, is the workforce. We are an aging community. I would assume there's some impact on small business there too, especially in smaller communities. Are those issues with the small business folks the same as the big? How is that affecting our small business in Michigan?
Workforce and available workforce has constantly been a top issue. Now, pre-pandemic, it was the number one issue. It was the top thing that you heard from businesses. You just can't find enough people. And part of that was because there was good growth that was happening in Michigan pre-pandemic in the economy, but our population wasn't growing, and or the years when it was growing, it was very anemic growth, and so it just wasn't keeping up. Our population was aging. More people died than were born the last few years, and so some of these struggles or challenges in population are baked in. We did a whole chapter on workforce availability, labor force participation in the scorecard report because it is a key issue. But I will say that since then, the rising cost environment has overtaken it as the top concern. Our surveys, we do quarterly surveys, and inflation and the overall rise in costs have taken precedent or taken the lead in most quarters of the top issue, the top single most important issue or problem that businesses are facing. And it really is brutal out there when it comes to cost, trying to stay ahead of those costs. Most small businesses operate on pretty small margins. And so when you have input costs, whether it's labor costs or material costs or production costs that go up, it really squeezes the margin. And that's happening all up and down the process. So you got individuals, consumers that are feeling the pinch of inflation. You've got buyers out there that are saying we don't think we can raise prices anymore, and so they're pushing some of that pressure down on the supply chain. It's a very complex and difficult time right now to manage the rising cost environment. And then you throw in uncertainty, kind of the newest factor in there is uncertainty when it comes to things like supply chain and what's happening with tariffs around the world. It's one thing to not like the answer, but it's another thing to not know what the answer is going to be. And I think this year, we'll look back on it and say that was just a year of uncertainty and a lot of entrepreneurs that are taking a wait-and-see approach.
So, and you mentioned where I guess I was going to head next with that, with the uncertainty. Who knows what's going to happen? I think it's on a 90-day pause right now. But the issue of tariffs, we hear about it, how it's going to affect the auto industry or this industry. But the small business person, to your point, getting supplies and things like that, that is something. So and that was another question I have. I'll just kind of rumble it all in there. The news that's out there. Are our small business folks, with the news cycles always going, always changing? This might be kind of an off-the-wall, oddball question, but just the way we cover news and the way it gets reported, do you think that has a negative effect on how our small business people are dealing with the world out there?
There is definitely a relentlessly negative news cycle that I would say small business owners are regular people, just like anybody else. It does have an impact. Mm-hmm. You're told over and over again, you should be worried. This is a problem.
Yeah.
And chances are you're going to be more worried and maybe pull back a little bit. So, but there are real things to consider, especially for those who import materials that they need for their processes. I think those businesses are really struggling right now for how to, if there are no domestically sourced options, how do they work through this? And smaller businesses generally have fewer options. But what's interesting is that as we face the future, and it looks like the economy might be softening somewhat. GDP is growing a little slower. Interest rates, ratcheting up to try to get inflation down. That does dampen economic activity. That's literally what it's designed to do, dampening economic activity to keep inflation from growing more. And so rates have been higher for a while now, and it is definitely having an impact. And then you throw the uncertainty on top of that. So given that, what's our best bet? And I think the Entrepreneurship Scorecard report tells us the answer to that. In the last 20 years, we've seen 2 recessions in the last 20 years. And really, if you go back a little further, 3 recessions. But what we see is that the self-employed and stage one businesses, remember stage one being the 1 to 9 employees,
Yep.
those are actually the most stable employment bases that we have for recessionary periods. When we look back during those last couple of recessions, we saw that employment levels among those two categories went down less than all of the other categories, including big businesses. And that goes against conventional wisdom. People think, oh, it must be much more secure with a bigger employer.
Mm-hmm.
That is not what the data shows. Bigger employers are actually faster in making adjustments to lay people off. They make layoff decisions much more quickly than smaller businesses. And so if you're worried about employment, then you should be worried about those solopreneurs and the 1 to 9 employees. Those tend to be the most stable. They go down less. And over the last 20 years, those are the two categories that have grown the most in Michigan. They have outgrown the number of stage 2, stage 3, and large businesses that have formed actually by quite a bit. So that's the bright spot, is the very small businesses are more stable in terms of a base of employment, and they're growing faster. You put those things together, and I think that it's a message to policymakers. That's where you should put your time and attention focused. That's your best bet. That provides you like a resiliency and a kind of an automatic diversity, geographic diversity, and also industry diversity. By focusing on those businesses and making sure that everything's working well for them, that's what paves the way for the future. That provides a great employment base, and ultimately will lead to more businesses that are in the other stages in the future. The more that survive through stage 1, the more the more stage 2, those 1099 employee businesses, the more of those that you'll have.
Sure. Well, it's interesting because talking about those 1 to 9 small businesses, we heard it during the whole wage and sick time discussion. Well, heck, those employees are like family to me. I take care of them. And I think that might be part of it, is those small businesses, they are generally, not always, but generally a fairly close-knit group. So I guess that brings me to another thought is, earlier in the year, it was all, the sick time issues and all of that. We got that taken care of. How, to your knowledge, how have the small businesses been able to adapt and kind of come up? Because there are new rules now. It isn't just like it was a year ago. Things are different. How are businesses reacting and adapting to the new rules?
Well, it's a mandate, so they have to. They just have to do it.
Yeah.
But it has been a difficult road for many, and it's not just the requirement. When we surveyed our member, we found that 83% of our members already exceeded the total number of PTO days, paid time off days, required by this legislation. But the legislation really kind of narrowed in, or gave a one-size-fits-all approach. Thankfully, they added in some additional flexibility there at the 11th hour, which was very, very appreciated. But, when we surveyed our members, what we found was that what employees were demanding more of was actually flexibility and pay and advancement opportunities. It wasn't like more PTO days was actually way down the list of their priorities. And so, unfortunately, what the government has done here is they have said to employers and businesses, you're not allowed to respond to what your employees say they want. You must give them this thing that we say that they should want. And that's too bad, because especially in the smaller employers, you just work stuff out. That's the way it works.
Yep.
That's the way it works. Jack, you'd mentioned that that small businesses treat their teams like employees. A lot of times, or like a family.
Like family, yeah.
But a lot of times the employees are literally family.
That's true too.
So it is a natural kind of environment to make sure that they're taken care of. And really, I think the travesty of this very, very expensive and rigid mandate that has gone into effect is that it says to those small businesses that you're not allowed to give your employees what they want. You must give them what the government says they should want.
Yep.
And of course, when it's so expensive to administer this thing or to provide the benefit as the government requires today that it does take away from what a business is otherwise has available for things like pay raises, for things like promotions, for things like expansions. Like this is not something that doesn't come without a cost. Unfortunately, it comes with a big cost.
Sure. Well, our time is getting short, but I do want to make a little bit of a public service announcement here. We got a lot of small businesses out there in the state of Michigan, folks listening right now. Tell us a little bit about the Small Business Association. What is it you can provide folks, and how do you help small business other than coming on my show and cheering them on?
It is a community of entrepreneurs. If you're out there running a business, chances are it's kind of a lonely endeavor. It's when you're at the top of an organization, even if it's very small, hard for people in your circle to really know what that's like. And so, number one, it's a community for people that own small businesses. But we walk alongside people. It's compliance education, stand on top of what the requirements are and how the regulatory requirements change, best practices, networking, but also employee benefit solutions as you're expanding your team and taking some of the administrative burden off as well. We do energy efficiency. There's so many different things. Our foundation also provides hub services through the MEDC's Small Business Support Hub program. There's a lot of different aspects to what we do at SBAM. I would really encourage people to check out the website, sbam.org, sbam.org. And kick the tires. See, but the most popular thing that we do is we connect small business owners to other small business owners.
Gotcha. Well, folks, we're talking with the Commander-in-Chief of SBAM, Brian Calley. Brian, as always, whenever I hear you speak, you're always informative. It's logical. It's straightforward, which I think most small businesses are. I know I've been involved in a small business, and I understand that every day is can be a lot of anxiety because you're trying to make this thing go and hopefully bring on more employees and make it bigger. So just knowing that there's a community out there of support, that's a beautiful thing. So thanks for everything you guys do, and appreciate you being with us today.
My pleasure, Jack. Thanks so much for having me on.
You betcha. Brian Calley, Small Business Association of Michigan, here on the Weekend Journal on News Talk 580 WTCM. We'll be right back. Don't go away.